Welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at a separate piece.
Okay.
We're going to be focusing on one chapter
Right.
that has this really pivotal event that happens between the two main characters, Gene and Phineas.
Mm-hmm.
And we have just one source this time.
Okay.
Just this one chapter really focusing on this event and the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to figure out what this event tells us about Gene and Phineas's friendship.
Well, it's interesting you say life-altering because that's really what makes this chapter so compelling.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just about a broken leg.
Right.
It's about broken trust, broken dreams, and the realization that some things can never be put back together.
Right. Yeah, so let's set the scene a little bit.
Okay.
So it's the summer of 1942 at this elite New England boarding school.
Right.
Devon World War II is going on.
Right.
But, for these boys, the war is really happening on the athletic fields and in the classroom.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Phineas has this accident.
Mm-hmm.
He breaks his leg and everything changes. The masters at Devon see it as this really tragic irony, almost like a reflection of the war itself.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating about their reaction is that it kind of highlights how precarious youth is, especially during a time of war.
Yeah.
They view Phineas's injury as this stolen innocence, a reminder that, even in this idyllic setting, tragedy can strike.
Yeah. And then you have Gene,
Right.
who is our narrator,
Mm-hmm.
and he is just a wreck after this happens.
Yeah.
So consumed with guilt and fear.
He's really struggling.
He's trying to erase himself almost.
Yeah.
Even going so far as to put on Phineas's clothes.
Well, and that's, a classic example of this literary technique.
Oh, yeah.
Foil characters where you have, Gene and Phineas, who are kind of these opposites.
Right. Right.
Phineas is this naturally gifted athlete, really outgoing.
Yeah.
And Gene is much more introspective intellectual.
Right.
And so riddled with self-doubt. So when Gene puts on Phineas's clothes, it's not just a physical act. It's him trying to embody those qualities that he feels like he lacks. He's trying to escape the burden of his own identity, even if it's just for a moment.
Yeah. And he gets this temporary relief, but it's totally shattered when the doctor comes in and he's like, yeah, Phineas is never going to play sports again.
Right.
And Gene just loses it.
Yeah, he has this outburst.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's trying to bargain with fate.
Yeah.
And it's clear that, for Phineas, athleticism wasn't just a talent.
Right.
It was the symbol of freedom, his vitality.
Yes. And Gene's reaction, it makes me wonder if he's experiencing some survivor's guilt.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because he's physically unharmed,
Right.
but he's carrying the weight of what he's done.
Yeah.
And maybe the weight of what Phineas has lost.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And after the doctor leaves, Gene's like, oh my God, Phineas is going to know.
Yeah.
He's going to confront me.
He thinks Phineas is going to accuse him.
Yeah, and demand an explanation.
This is where the psychological thriller aspect really kicks in.
Oh, yeah.
Because, Gene's an unreliable narrator.
Right.
And his thoughts are just spiraling into paranoia and self-loathing. And as the reader, we're trapped in his head.
Right.
We're experiencing the world through his distorted lens.
And then they finally meet at the infirmary, and it's not what Gene expected at all.
Right.
Phineas is weak.
Yeah, he's physically diminished.
Yeah.
His demeanor is different, subdued by the medication. But his main concern is Gene's well-being.
I know.
It's so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because Phineas is the one who's been injured.
Right.
Yet he's still reaching out, offering comfort.
Yeah.
It just really speaks volumes about his character.
It does.
And it just further emphasizes the depth of Gene's betrayal.
Yeah. And the way the confession comes out is just so raw.
Yeah.
It's so uncontrolled. He just blurts out, I jounced the limb. I caused it.
Yeah. It's just this torrent of guilt that he can't contain.
Yeah. And then Phineas doesn't get angry.
No.
He doesn't accuse Gene. He just says, of course you didn't. It's almost like he refuses to believe it.
Right. He can't even process it.
Yeah.
He's refusing to accept that possibility.
Yeah.
That Gene could be capable of doing such a thing.
You could argue that he's in denial.
Right.
Protecting himself from this really painful truth.
Yeah.
But I think it's more complicated than that.
Oh, absolutely. I think Phineas's denial is as much about protecting Gene as it is about protecting himself.
Totally.
He's clinging to this idealized version of their friendship.
Yeah.
And just refusing to accept that Gene could do this.
It's almost like he's saying, I know you better than you know yourself.
Exactly.
Which I think is so interesting.
And that denial creates this incredibly complex dynamic because you have Gene who's wrestling with this guilt, desperate to confess. And then you have Phineas who's determined to maintain this facade of
Yeah.
innocence and loyalty.
Yeah, so Gene decides he's going to wait.
Okay.
And he thinks, okay, I can make it up to him later.
Mm-hmm.
Our friendship can withstand this.
But the question is, can it?
Right. Because Gene's actions have exposed this, like, huge crack in their bond.
Yeah.
And the longer he waits to tell the truth, the wider that crack's going to become.
That's a great point. We've only really seen it from Gene's perspective.
Right.
Like, his internal struggle. What about Phineas?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on beneath the surface of this denial?
Exactly.
And we'll delve into that in part 2 of our deep dives.
I mean, it's almost like he's holding on to this hope that if he ignores the truth,
Yeah.
if he refuses to acknowledge that Gene betrayed him,
Right.
he can somehow preserve their friendship.
Right. But is that realistic?
Yeah, is that hope realistic,
Yeah.
or is he setting them both up for more pain down the road?
Right. And then in the next part of the chapter, when Gene returns to Devon in the fall, he describes this month that he spent at home as, like, unreal.
Right.
Like he was sleepwalking through his life almost.
That's a really good point.
Mm.
It suggests that he's already starting to compartmentalize,
Yeah.
like detach himself from his emotions
Yeah.
to cope with what he's done. Yeah, it's like he's in this weird in-between space, not really present in his own life.
Right.
Because he's so worried about this secret
Mm-hmm.
and like what's going to happen if it comes out.
And that fear really manifests itself in his decision to go see Phineas on his way back to school.
Yeah, it was so impulsive.
He doesn't plan it. He just suddenly feels this urge to see him.
Yeah.
Even though he knows it might be a bad idea.
Yeah. And I was struck by the way Knowles describes Phineas's house.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's this very traditional, comfortable home filled with pictures of his family and heirlooms.
Right. It's such a stark contrast to Devon,
It is.
which is so impersonal.
Yeah.
But that contrast is really important because it emphasizes how personal this whole situation is for Phineas.
Mhm.
His home represents his roots, his identity outside of Devon and their friendship.
Right.
And Gene is coming into this space with his secret.
Yeah.
And he's threatening to disrupt Phineas's sense of peace and stability.
He's like this intruder.
Exactly.
Like he's this wild element who's about to like unleash chaos.
Yeah.
Into Phineas's perfectly constructed world.
Exactly. And that sense of impending chaos is just heightened by Phineas's total obliviousness.
Oh, totally.
He's so happy to see Gene,
I know.
excited to catch up, totally unaware of what's going on inside Gene's head.
Yeah. There's that scene where Phineas is showing Gene around the house
Yeah.
and pointing out pictures and telling him all these childhood stories.
It's so poignant
It is.
because it really highlights their connection,
Mhm.
but also this like chasm that's opened up between them.
Right.
Because of what Gene did.
Yeah. And you can see that chasm in Gene's thoughts.
Right.
He compares himself to a wild man
Yeah.
who's going to like tear this place apart with his confession.
That's such a powerful image.
Yeah.
It really captures the destructive potential of Gene's secret.
And he tries to make light of things,
Right.
tell a funny story,
Yeah.
but you can tell he can't avoid the truth anymore.
The tension is palpable.
And then he just comes right out and says
He
it.
does.
I deliberately jounced the limb so you would fall off.
He's so blunt.
Yeah.
It's brutal
Yeah.
and so hard to hear.
And Phineas, he doesn't get angry.
No.
He doesn't accuse Gene. He just says, of course you didn't.
I know. It's like his mind is refusing to process the information.
Yeah.
Refusing to accept it.
It's like he's saying, if Gene could do this to me, then it means our whole friendship was a lie.
Right. And that's a truth that he's not ready to face.
Yeah. And Gene keeps insisting.
Yeah.
He gets more and more agitated.
He's desperate for Phineas to just acknowledge the truth.
Yeah. And Phineas, he doesn't budge.
He holds firm.
He even tells Gene to shut up.
I know. And I think that's where you see the complexity of Phineas's character.
What do you mean?
His denial isn't just about protecting Gene.
Right.
It's also about protecting himself.
Okay.
He's clinging to this idea of their friendship, this belief that their bond is unbreakable.
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't believe that,
Yeah.
then he can't make sense of what happened.
Yeah. So they're both trapped in this
Doesn't
cycle of
sense.
denial and guilt.
Yeah.
And they can't move forward
They can't.
because they're clinging to these different versions of reality.
And that's where the setting becomes so important again.
Right. Yeah.
Because the intimacy of Phineas's home, the
Right.
fact that his family is there,
Right.
it makes it impossible for Gene to take back his confession.
It's like the truth is out there and it can't be unspoken.
Exactly.
And Gene ends up making this excuse about being tired,
Yeah.
about not making sense.
Like he's trying to backpedal.
Yeah, but it's so weak.
That's all he can manage.
Yeah, and when he's leaving,
Mm-hmm.
Phineas says, you aren't going to start living by the rules, are you?
That line.
And Gene says, Oh, no, I wouldn't do that.
It's just dripping with irony.
It is.
Because we know that Gene is living under the weight of this huge lie,
Yeah.
a lie that he created to protect himself,
Right.
but which could destroy his friendship with Phineas.
And that's where the chapter ends.
It does.
And you're left wondering what happens next.
Right. Can their friendship survive this?
Yeah. Can Gene ever forgive himself?
Big questions.
Yeah. And we'll explore those and more in the final part of our deep dive. When Phineas asks Gene if he's going to start living by the rules.
Yeah.
And Gene's like, no. Oh, no. I would never do that.
Right.
So I thought that was so interesting.
It really is. It's like classic Gene,
Yeah.
trying to convince himself that he can still be this carefree, rebellious Phineas.
Right.
When we know that's impossible.
Yeah, like he thinks if he just rejects all these societal norms, it'll somehow make up for what he did.
Right. It's like he's trying to externalize his guilt.
Yeah.
But I think deep down, he knows that real freedom comes from facing the truth.
Yeah, not running from it.
Exactly. And that's the central question of the whole book.
Oh, yeah.
Will Gene find the courage to deal with what he did and
Yeah.
seek redemption? Or is he just going to keep living with this lie?
Yeah, forever stuck in this cycle of guilt and denial.
And that's what makes Noel's writing so brilliant. He doesn't give us easy answers.
Right.
He leaves us with all these complex questions about morality and
Yeah.
forces us to look at the darkness that's inside all of us.
And the fact that this is all happening during World War II just adds another layer to it.
It does.
You have these boys on the verge of adulthood
Right.
dealing with all this inner turmoil while the world around them is falling apart.
It's a powerful reminder that even when there's huge global conflict happening,
Right.
our own personal struggles can feel just as big.
Yeah. So going back to Gene and Phineas,
Yeah.
do you think their friendship can actually survive this?
That's a tough one.
It is.
I mean, on the one hand, their bond is definitely damaged.
Right, the trust is broken.
The truth is out in the open.
Yeah, even if it hasn't been fully acknowledged.
Right. But on the other hand, they have this really deep connection.
Yeah, all that history.
You can't just erase that.
And I think that's what makes this chapter so powerful.
It is.
We're left with all these unanswered questions, and we have to think about the complexity of human nature and how strong relationships can be.
It's a story that stays with you
It does.
long after you finish the book.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about your own relationships.
Totally.
The choices you make in your own life.
Yeah, and how you deal with guilt and forgiveness.
Right.
And like trying to find redemption.
Exactly.
So for everyone listening, I want you to think about how this experience is going to affect Gene moving forward.
Yeah.
Will he just be consumed by guilt?
Right.
Or can he find a way to use this pain to grow?
Right.
It really makes you consider how we deal with adversity
Mhm.
and if we can find meaning even in the darkest of times.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.